Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a long awaited, really. I've been really excited for this Q&A with the wonderful Nathaniel Glanzman, who's a teacher here at the Muse. If you're not familiar with the Muse, we're a creative writing center. We're physically based in Norfolk, Virginia, but since the pandemic, we had to go completely virtual, and we now offer virtual classes, in-person classes in our center, which is in Ghent, as well as hybrid classes. So you can choose which way you would like to attend. And we have events and outreach programs as well. So definitely check out our website if you would like, is the-muse.org. There's a lot of info on there. If you have any young writers in your life, any teen writers or middle schoolers or younger, definitely keep an eye on that. Our teen fellowship applications are open, and our youth program is really going to be up and running as strong as ever in 2023. So we're really excited about that. And keep an eye out for the adult schedule too for classes. I think, Nate, you're teaching, right, coming up?
I did the schedule come out yet?
No, it's not out yet. We're still
okay.
working on it, but
yeah, but I applied to teach, so hopefully I will be.
You will be.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. But anyways, we'll go ahead and get into things. If you are watching on Facebook, first of all, hello and welcome. And if you would like to join us here in Zoom, please go to the Facebook event, and there should be a link to get the Zoom link. So please go ahead and do that. I will try to keep an eye on the Facebook chat too. So if you want to leave a question, you can do it there in the comment section of the live stream. But we're going to get to the people who've already asked questions ahead of time, or who are who are in the Zoom webinar itself first, and then get to Facebook comments if we have time. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'll pass it over to the wonderful Nate. All you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nate Glanzman. I'm a teacher at the Muse. I specialize in sensitivity reading classes, and we're going to get into what sensitivity reading is here today. I'm a former high school English teacher. I'm also on the autism spectrum. There's a lot. There are a lot of categories that I can read for with sensitivity reading, and I'm really glad everyone's here, and we're going to be talking about what sensitivity reading is today. So. If you have any questions, just post it in the Q&A, and Susan will be able to get those questions to me. So let me actually open the Q&A thing so I can read it too. So sensitivity reading. So a lot of there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of fear over what sensitivity reading is, and like if why it's kind of being like pushed in the publishing industry right now. But sensitivity reading is a form of editing where a person who is ideally knowledgeable about hold on. Sarah, what is the right time in the process to get a sensitivity reader after the first draft or later draft? I will get to your question in just a minute, Sarah. So sensitivity reading is a form of editing where it's you hire somebody who shares an identity with a character who you're writing in your story. So let's say you're writing a book about a female to male trans person. You would then go to a sensitivity reader, preferably someone who's knowledgeable about novels, like who reads and who has critique partnered before. And you would ask them to read the manuscript and see if the representation of trans people is accurate. So it's really not about censorship. It's more about authenticity and accuracy, because and that's especially important because if there are misconceptions about an entire group of people in the media, that leads to real life consequences for people in those groups. So Sarah, to answer your question, when is the right time to hire a sensitivity reader, in the first draft or a later draft? Preferably as early as you can. So actually, I wanted to explain the different types of sensitivity reading services that can be offered. There are like manuscript reads where like the manuscript is already completed and then you read it and give comments. And I'm also going to be showing an example of comments as well. But you typically want to do it as early as possible, because I have run into instances where publishing companies will send me something that's already been formatted. So like everything's formatted already. They hire me really late in the game, and then one time I actually delayed a launch for one of the authors, and they were not happy with me. So the publisher was happy, but the author wasn't. So so that's what sensitivity reading is. It is a form of editing where a living person who has lived experience of the identity that you're writing about can let you know, like, hey, this is accurate. This represents my culture or identity well. And that is important because especially when you're writing about a group of people who exist in real life. It's not exactly it. So I'm kind of like, jumping around here, but oh, thank you. Susan changed my name to Nathaniel Glanzman. A lot of detractors of sensitivity reading will be like, well, isn't that censorship? And I actually did a podcast back in 2019 where there was a YouTuber who posted a video about how it's all censorship, and the publishing industry is trash, because like you're trying to censor what people can say and can't say. It's PC, whatever. And I actually DM'd them on Twitter, and I was like, hey, I'm a sensitivity reader, and this is actually what it is. And they were like, hey, can you come on this podcast? So I'll link the podcast actually at the end of the session, so you guys can check it out. My voice is a lot higher because this is me pre-transition. So but yeah, so there are misconceptions about it. People think that it's censorship, it's preventing people from writing what they want to write, and that's not true at all. Especially it's your God-given American right, to write whatever you want, right? So the thing is, though, people also have a right to respond to you, right? So you can write anything you want, you can publish anything you want, but then the people who are reading it get to respond. So yes. So Anonymous asks, how much do these types of services cost? I will get into that. So there is no industry standard right now. There is no industry standard right now, but there are guidelines in the whatever the authority is for freelancers. There's like a, hold on, I'll actually am I able to share my screen real quick? Hang on. Yeah. Yeah, let's do this here. So I have this already pulled up. So let's see. Oop, nope. I did not want that. Sorry, I'm a boomer here. I have to find the, oh boy. There we go. Okay. So first I'm going to show off our website here. Liam and I run a company called Helm and Anchor Editing, and we offer sensitivity reading services as well as copy and developmental editing. So before we actually go into pricing, I kind of wanted to read the description of what sensitivity reading is, because I think it's important. Sensitivity reading is a form of editing that focuses on the development of marginalized characters and their stories. When writing about a character from a marginalized identity, we must take care to represent them in an accurate way. Publishing has a long history of marginalized characters being tokenized and fetishized, which is true. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that leads to real life consequences for people with those identities. I actually it can even go as far as like people being denied services because the people in power have a perceived notion of what people with those conditions can and can't handle. So actually when I was diagnosed with autism when I was 23. And after I was diagnosed, I tried to get into like social groups, to kind of like, boost my social skills a little bit, because I was, kind of, yeah. And they flat out told me, no, you're too high functioning. So get out of here, basically. So like without really even evaluating like why I was there, or like, asking why I needed to be there. So like so because they had a preconceived notion about what autism is and what it looks like, I was denied those services. So like it's things like that that can, misconceptions in media can lead to negative consequences for the people with those identities. So No, not that. Nope, I don't want that. Okay. Sorry. So with pricing, there's me and Liam right there. So I want to do this really quick. I'm going to show you our pricing. Our rates are actually much cheaper than what people usually charge. So for our full manuscript reads, we only charge $250. And this was my set price when I first started. And I kind of just like continued it, and Liam approved it, of course. And so and the reason why is because, like, people are struggling right now. The economy is not really that great at the moment. So and we have like kind of a flat fee for under 100,000 words is just $250. Partial manuscript for under 50,000 words is $150. Individual stories or chapters are $50. And actually, I wanted to mention that we really do recommend sending us the full manuscript. And the reason why is not to make more money. It's actually because we want to evaluate what the narrative is, not what the author necessarily, but what the narrative is saying about those groups of people. Because I have run into instances before where I'm reading a book, and if I had only been sent one chapter, I would have missed entirely how that character evolved and changed over time, and what happened to that character. Like I would have, if I had only been sent one chapter of a particular book, I would have totally missed that the character had died, and it was a sacrificial lamb death. It was like a type of death where the purpose of the death was to demonstrate how to demonstrate to the majority white cishet audience how precious life is, and like it was for sympathy basically. So that would have been completely missed if I hadn't gotten the full manuscript. So it's very important to send the full manuscript if you can. We also offer sensitivity consulting for $150. And that's where before you even write your manuscript, this is where you can get in contact with us, and you can ask like, hey, I'm in the process of creating this character. How do I start? What are the details that I need to, So we also offer line and copy and developmental editing. But I wanted to actually show you guys something else. I wanted to show you the EFA guidelines real quick. So hang on one sec. Sorry. I'm gonna stop sharing right now. And I'm gonna go to the EFA guidelines. If anyone has any questions, I will be able to see them. I have the Q&A open. So hang on. We're gonna go to editorial rates. So the EFA is the Editorial Freelancers Association. So this is the organization that pretty much sets the standards as best they can with things that don't have an industry standard yet. Like sensitivity reading is a very new concept. I've been doing it since 2018. I'm kind of like one of the oldest people doing it. And so hold on, let me actually set up the screen share here. So the EFA sets a rate for sensitivity reading, and so it kind of depends. You can do a flat fee like Liam and I do, but you can also pay by the hour, and you can also pay by the word, and you can also pay by the pages. So I don't typically recommend doing pages because like the fonts can be different and all that, but I have through Writing Diversely, which is a different organization that I work with, we can charge per hour or per word depending on what the client wants. But the problem though with charging per hour is that hour is going to depend on how fast the person can read. So it's not really measuring like the level of detail in your feedback. So typically people will choose by the word. And I will say like it's going to like that obviously adds up. Like actually, if you want to just do the math right now, if we wanted to do like hang on, but yeah, if you wanted to kind of do 100,000 times 0.1 cents, 0.01 cents, how much would that be, right? So it does add up. But you know, the how much a sensitivity reader will charge will depend on their level of experience, and will depend on if they have a set rate like we do, or if they're charging per word or per hour. So I hope that answers your question. So yeah, does anyone have any questions so far about anything that I said? Liam, you got anything? You're right there. Never mind. I'm not calling on you, but sorry. Oh, so yeah, okay, so that one, okay. There, yes, so Sarah asks, when you give feedback, what does that look like? And I'm really glad that you asked that, because I will be sharing the screen right now to well, actually no, hang on. I'm going to show everybody examples of so this example I use in my own classes. Like, I teach classes of sensitivity reading at the Muse. And I'm going to be showing you guys and the example that I use when I'm teaching, which is an old writing of mine. So I'm going to be kind of, you know, dogging myself here, but okay. So there are weird names in this one. It was kind of about esports players, so there are names of people that are food. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to share my screen right now. Yeah. So as you can see on the screen, this is an example. This is a sample of my old writing, and these comments are very typical of what you would see in a sensitivity reader thing. So you know, one of the things I pointed out, so the characters in the story drive a creeper van. And so I said, you know, a bunch of legal adults visiting a 12-year-old boy's house in a creeper van is probably a joke in poor taste. It is. So you know, that's something that a sensitivity reader would pick up on. So I also noted here that one of the characters is actually not Rastafarian, even though he had long dreads. Rastafarian is actually not an aesthetic, it's a religion. So I was kind of like fetishizing, misrepresenting Rastafarianism in this instance. So, you know, and there was a character, a non-binary character in there. I spy something without a gender. You know, I didn't run that joke by a non-binary person. So if you're non-binary, please let me know if that joke is acceptable or not. I'm not non-binary myself. So yeah, I mean, that is an example of what those comments would contain. And usually I write when I'm sensitivity reading a full manuscript, it comes out to like 60 or 70 comments usually. If you know, if I don't really have much to comment on, I mean, you know, I'm sure that would be good for a writer's anxiety, but it's bad for my anxiety, because I'm like, oh no, do they think that they're getting their money's worth? Uh-oh. So you know, so the way I work is that those comments will be included all throughout the manuscript, and then we also give a summarized report of all of the things that we saw, the major concepts, I guess, in the feedback. And that typically, so in the contract it says 1 page, but it's very often more than 1 page. Usually it can go from like 3 to 10 pages, really, so depending on what is being discussed. So yeah, I hope that answers your question for feedback. Does anyone have any more questions so far before I go on? What? No, I know, but like, sorry, I just wanted to ask the chat real quick. All right. So, let's see. So we went over what sensitivity reading is. And there's another question. So I compiled a bunch of questions ahead of time, because I'm very surprised I'm pleased with the turnout. I wasn't expecting such a huge turnout. That's awesome. I'm really glad you guys are here. So one of the questions that I gathered ahead of time was one sec, sorry, was why should you hire a sensitivity reader in the first place? And I know that there are a lot of people who think that it's unnecessary, because like, why can't you just like do the research yourself? Like, why are you hiring another person to read it for you? And a lot of that comes down to, most sorry about that. That was my dryer. Most authors who who are not writing about the marginalized identity that they're writing about. So like, people like, white cishet people who are not used to being marginalized or don't really don't have experience being in the identity that they're writing about. A lot of the times it's very ego-centered. People think that, I need to hire a sensitivity reader so that I don't end up getting canceled or so that I don't receive pushback. And I want to stress that when you write a book, the book is goes beyond you, right? That book is now another universe in somebody else's head times a million, or how many people are reading your book. And that book, depending on how popular it is, can lead to positive or negative consequences for the people who are the living people, the living culture who you're writing about, because it can influence political people. It can influence people who give services like the ones that I described before. I actually heard a horror story on Twitter where an own voices meaning somebody who is of the identity that they're writing about, an own voices autistic author was trying to publish their book, and they were rejected by an agent because the character wasn't like the guy on Atypical. So it's an own voices book. Like, what do you mean? You didn't write autism correctly because it's not like the kid on Atypical. Are you kidding me? So so it can lead to real life consequences for living people who are being represented in your book. So to answer the question, I guess it's important because these are people in real life who are not only going to be reading about it, but who are going to be living in a world that has a certain perception of them. And as long as that perception is as accurate as possible, that's going to lead to more awareness and understanding about what that thing is, and can lead to them being understood and getting the services that they need, or wherever the case may be. So it could lead to people in power not discriminating against them as much. So I just want to make sure I'm not sharing my screen anymore. No, I'm not. So yeah, let's see. So another question that I gathered ahead of time is why does correct representation matter? And I kind of went into that already, but like these are real people that you're representing in your book by having a character who is who may or may not be accurate to the experiences of the people in that culture. Something that I one of my trash TV shows that I like to watch is Ancient Aliens. And it always like kind of makes me angry when these white people are like, oh, like it had to have been aliens, like when it had to have been aliens who made the statues at Easter Island, whereas there's a living culture there, the Rapa Nui. Like they will be able to tell you how they made those stones and got them to the edge of the island. It was a bunch of guys and a bunch of ropes. Like it. So it was an alien. So like, so there are people who will be able to let you know how to represent their culture, their living culture correctly. So and that's important because just as if you're writing a historical fiction and you wouldn't want to say that something happened in the wrong year or misrepresent a real person who lived, like you wouldn't want to misrepresent a whole group of people who actually exist in real life. And actually, to go on a tangent, one of the points that people were making in the podcast that I was on, they were like, well, what if you just like make a bunch of elves and like they're elves, they're not real people. And it's like, okay, but they're coded as this group because of these reasons. And because when you're reading something, we are going to be applying real life logic to fantasy. If the elves have quote almond shaped eyes and they're good at math and they're not very sexualized, they're going to be coded as East Asian. Like you're going to know that based on how they're presented, and that's a very stereotypical representation of East Asian people also. So the concept of coding is where even if that culture, you supposedly created that culture in your mind, you're basing that information based on things that you're experiencing and things that you're perceiving in everyday life. So people in the groups that you're subconsciously writing about will be able to pick up on those characteristics, and they'll be able to respond with, hey, these are very clearly East Asian based elves, and they're written in a very stereotypical way, and that will lead to real life consequences for those people. That can lead to stereotypes like all Asians are good at math. I'm an Asian who's bad at math. I always have been. So it's that's a very, like, I guess, niche example, but the public consciousness is based on media. The books that are out there, like people learn about other cultures predominantly through books and media. So if that representation is off, that's going to lead to, that's not going to be good for the living people who are in that culture. So, all right. Be a nice human. Don't misrepresent living cultures, right? So yeah, I am watching the chat in case anybody has any questions, but I'm just gonna kind of go through the questions that I got ahead of time. Also, so we went over the pricing. We went over how it differs from censorship, and again, like you can write anything that you want, but then people have a right to respond with why that representation was accurate or not. And of course, literary criticism is not the same thing as attack. So like it's very common where someone will hire a sensitivity reader. That sensitivity reader will then give them feedback as to the misrepresentation or the stereotypes that were used. And it's very common and natural and human to get defensive when faced with that feedback, because you don't think you're a racist, and you don't want to be seen as somebody who does that. But I kind of my whole philosophy has always been, if it's not published, if it's a first draft, and you take that feedback in and you revise it, that's all that we can ask for, is that you recognize that that those beliefs that you had about this culture, this living culture, that exists in real life, I always have to stress that people, it's natural to get defensive, or it's natural to panic and think like, oh my God, I'm going to be canceled. But again, like, the book exists beyond you. It's not about your ego. It's about making sure that this culture is represented correctly. So my thing is that, as long as you understand the feedback, and as long as you apply that feedback to your revisions, that is everything that you need to do. We're not perfect. We grew up in an imperfect society where certain ideals about people are taught to us in school. That colonialism is good, or that racism is over because of Martin Luther King, or because like all of these things that we're taught in school or around us sometimes aren't true, and we need to confront that sometimes. So another question that was gathered ahead of time is, how do I go about finding the right sensitivity reader for me? So I want to refer back to our website, Helm and Anchor Editing, and I also want to refer to the Writing Diversely database. So Writing Diversely is another organization that I'm a part of, and it focuses it has like a database categorized by identity, so you can choose the correct sensitivity reader for you. Let me actually just share the screen real quick. I'm going to show you the Writing Diversely database, and I'm also going to show you mine and Liam's Oh, sweet. Thank you, Susan. So Susan linked writing diversely. I'm going to show you the database portion of it. So over here, we can see that you can request a reader over here. This is writingdiversely.com. And Writing Diversely is a freelancing organization that I'm a part of. And I just wanted to shout them out because they're great. It's super streamlined. You just fill out a form and request a reader for your manuscript, and we'll get in touch with you. So I just want to scroll back. I just want to scroll down to my profile here. Here I am. And I can read for all of those identities listed on screen. I can also copy and developmental edit because I have a degree in English. But I also wanted to show you guys our website, Helm Editing, because the profiles for Liam and I, we are able to list the, hang on one sec, able to list the identities that we can read for. And I just want to show you that right now. So if you go to our website, helmanacreediting.com, and you go to the section where it says sensitivity reading, let me share the screen right now. You'll be able to see the identities that Liam and I can read for. All of the identities that we share are marked in green. So either one of us can read for it. The identities in white, only one person can, because we don't share that experience. Which actually brings me to my next point. What if you need to hire a sensitivity reader, but that sensitivity reader doesn't have that identity listed on their profile or website? That means that particular sensitivity reader can't read for you because they don't have the lived experience. So, however, I know a lot of sensitivity readers personally who I work with and who have experience reading. So I will be able to refer you to somebody most likely. And you can also refer to the Writing Diversely database as well. I just want to see the, yeah, okay. So, all right. So Susan, we actually did answer the question before about feedback and what that looks like. Yeah, there we go. All right. Susan, do we have any questions on Facebook? I know
We
you're
don't
watching.
have any on Facebook, but I actually have a question for you.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually thought of it in the example you showed. How, I don't know if this has come up for you as you've been reading, but how, if you do address it, how do you deal with having a character that is insensitive in some way to a particular identity versus the writing itself? Because I feel like it's difficult to write a complete, you have a complete Mary Sue if your character is not flawed in some way, and oftentimes in the real world that flaw can include perpetuating these harmful systems and stereotypes. So as a sensitivity reader, if you come across a character like that, how do you address it, and how do you help the author so that the treatment of the character and the writing itself does not reflect those views?
So that's a great question. So that kind of leads into the difference between the character themselves and the narrative. So a character misrepresentation could look something like I'll use the Asian example again. I guess you could write an Asian character who is very who is asexual, unattractive, good at math, and that stereotype of Asian males in particular is kind of perpetuating the idea that Asian males are unattractive, or they're not sexual, they're not sexual people, or they're not good at sports. They're very bookwormy, and they're very cold and standoffish usually when they're represented like that. And an example of a narrative misrepresentation would be something like a curing plot for autistic characters. Like if you write an autistic character and they get cured of their autism at the end, you're perpetuating the idea that autism is something to be cured. It's a character flaw to overcome. It's not just a regular identity that also exists. And people with autism, I'm sure everyone would agree here that we are people just like everyone else, and we deserve fair treatment, just like neurotypical people. So it wouldn't be fair or very realistic to expect us to change the way that we think. Society itself needs to kind of accept that we have a certain way of thinking and behaving, and not all of it is inappropriate, you know. We're yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Like what happens to the character is more of a narrative problem, whereas the impressions of the character are more of a character problem. And you know, and you could also swing to the complete opposite side. You could write a character who has a certain identity, but you just it's very clear that the author just wants those diversity points, and they add that minor character with no flaws whatsoever. So you can write like maybe a trans character who is like super amiable, like really friendly, really chill, like just a likable character, but they have no flaws and they have no arc of their own. So like, and you're able to see that in text. So that character doesn't really do anything. They're basically like a hood ornament, you know, cardboard person for the main character to be like, see, I have a trans friend, and they don't do anything in the story. So you need to make sure that that these diverse characters have an arc of their own, that they grow and change also, and you need to give them flaws. You need to give them things to overcome, but that thing to overcome can't directly be because of their identity. You know, like autism is a perfect example of this. You know, because like there are a lot of traditionally published well-respected books that have a narrative where autism is something to be overcome. Autism is something to get over, you know, in order to have a happy life, and that's just not true. In fact, masking your autism is actually harmful to people. So I hope that answers your question. All right. And anybody can join through video chat and voice. Also, you can come on.
If you want to do that, like say in the chat or raise your hand, because I have to give you permission to.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
right.
Anyone's welcome to if you'd like.
I'm also watching the chat here, and you know, and also one other thing that I'm going to say also is that this doesn't need to just be contemporary fiction. Like if you're writing a character who is coded as a certain thing, your marginalized readers will be able to pick up on that, and will be able to tell you like, hey, that's not accurate to our experience. And it does matter, because when you're writing about living people who are going to be facing their perceptions perpetuated in media, their real lives are going to be impacted potentially by this book. Like I mean, I don't mean to trigger anybody, but like the goblins in Harry Potter, you know, are a perfect example of misrepresented Jewish, you know, because the goblins, you know, short little men with hooked noses who work in a bank, who are greedy. That's very clearly stereotypical Jewish representation. And I know that because I'm half Jewish myself. So I'm very aware. Yeah, see, there you go. Solidarity. So you know, those ideas that Jews are greedy dates all the way back centuries, you know, where Jews were not allowed to have actual jobs where they earned their own money because they were discriminated against. So they had to deal in other people's money by selling things. And sometimes those things were not of high quality, but they had no control over that, because that was somebody else's business, because they weren't allowed to deal in their own money. So, you know, the Jews kind of get a rap for being greedy and being like snake oil salesman, but it's like, what other choices do they have? It was either that or being homeless. So, you know, like that's not their money. So, you know, yeah, that hope that answers your question. So, so I'm gonna jump into some other pre-gathered questions. I'm gonna be watching the Q&A section as well. Man, it's 7:42 already. What? Time is flying by. Okay. So we went over finding the right sensitivity reader for you. A sensitivity reader cannot read for an identity that they are not a part of. So if you want to hire me, but I'm not of that identity, I will be able to refer you to somebody. So this question actually comes from my friend Derek from Facebook. You'll be able to see his question in one of the comments, not on the live, but of one of the comment sections is how does somebody become a sensitivity reader? And actually, I teach a class in how to become a sensitivity reader if you are a marginalized person and you want to get into this field. I will say though that it's not for everybody. You will be reading things that are going to be potentially upsetting. You're going to be reading about characters who die a horrible death for the sake of the privileged characters. You are going to be reading about characters who get over their marginalized group in order to assimilate with the other characters. You are going to be reading about upsetting things. Or on the other side of that, you're going to be reading about characters who are just there for show, who don't have an arc of their own and who don't have flaws. And you're going to be basically coming to terms with the fact that this author has a wrong perception, an inaccurate perception about this living real culture that exists, and who are going to be facing consequences based on the perception of the media. So, but sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. But how does one become a sensitivity reader? Basically, just I started on the writing in the margins database, which is not in existence anymore. And then I switched over to writing diversely after that. But like you basically just take on clients and then like build up a portfolio, and you and people will, you know, basically share you around. It's basically like any other freelance work. You just build up, you know, clients and stuff. So and why people kept coming back to me was that I built up a portfolio of publishing companies as well. Like I mean, I don't work with them right now currently, but I've worked with HarperCollins. But you know, because of the strike, I'm not working with them currently. But I've also worked with Penguin Random House. So you know, it's so once you develop like a solid list of private clients, like you will be able to build yourself up to freelancing for publishing companies. And yeah, it's basically just word of mouth at the start of it. I mean, you know, create your own website, social media market as best you can, and you know, hopefully your name will get out there. And what's going to set you apart if you start out sensitivity reading is the quality of your feedback. If you have frequent comments in the margins, and if you have a well-rounded report at the end, and you give suggestions for improvement as well, you know, that's going to set you apart from other people who would just say like that's wrong, and like not giving you reasons as to why. So you know, just make sure that you are client focused, you know, that you don't outright accuse somebody of being a racist or being homophobic or whatever, like because they wrote a book, that person is not their book. This book has to stand on its own when you're giving feedback. You want to use language like this character is exhibiting this trait because of this, like not attacking the author, you know, you know, trying to publish a book that's going to be perpetuating these stereotypes. Like you don't want to demonize the author, because they legitimately 99% of the time like don't like they don't want to, like no author wants to intentionally misrepresent a group, because that's not going to be good for them, right? Like they're not going to be very popular. They're not going to, you know, they're going to face pushback. So they when hiring a sensitivity reader, oftentimes people are very like anxious, and they want validation that they're doing the right thing by hiring you, and they are, especially private clients, because private clients come to you just on their own volition with their own money, you know, and that's honestly I've had better experiences with private clients than I have with authors in publishing, because authors in publishing do it because they're forced to by their editor. So you know, I tell this story all the time in my classes, but I kind of wanted to tell like kind of a horror story a little bit. So I was working with a client in this was an already formatted, traditionally published book that was going to be out there. And they had already formatted the book, and they hired me like so late in the game that I ended up coming back with a laundry list of inaccuracies and that delayed this author's launch. And this author ended up blocking me on Twitter and blocking me on everything, and didn't sign the book that the publisher, like, the publisher was so sweet. They were like, yeah, thank you so much for sensitivity reading. Like, they wrote me a little note with a copy of the book that they sent me for free, and the author didn't even sign it. So like, I know that this author was salty that I delayed her launch, but you know what, like, what can you do? You know, like, you hired me too late. Like, it's not my fault. So so sometimes that can happen. And yeah, so let's see. So some of the other questions that I gathered ahead of time were specifically for, like, they were more specific with like their particular project. One of the questions was for historical works where slurs are used, how do you go about writing a piece that's true to history while still being sensitive to the identities involved? And that is an excellent question. That's a question that I get all the time. And the answer is that even though those slurs were used, you want to make sure that those slurs are being used by characters that you're not going to be sympathizing with. So characters who are overtly racist or homophobic, those characters, unless they have a personal arc that will show that development over time where they're not that way, either by meeting somebody or that some type of growth is happening. You want to make sure that those characters are those characters, and by extension those ideals, are not being rewarded by the narrative, by no consequences being issued for using that type of language. So so in general, you want to make sure that that even if those slurs are used, that the characters who are using those slurs either get pushback from other characters, or they're challenged in some way. Their growth is being shown throughout the narrative, that their mind is changing about those types of people. So so that's yeah. Sorry, Susan, were you gonna say something? Oh, sorry, I heard somebody. But yeah. So and this comment actually I got from Facebook from my friend Sarah. So she writes, I think for me as a cis hetero white woman, I'm unaware of my blind spots. What are some good ways to learn more about the cultures of the characters I'm writing about without putting the burden on the members of those groups to teach me? So that's an excellent question. Read articles from people from those groups. I mean, there are many resources online. If you type in like how to write blank character, you'll be able to find articles written by people who are either of that group and they write themselves, or they read and they outline exactly how to accurately represent those characters. You'll be able to find blog posts, you'll be able to find articles written by people who are a part of that group. So that's the best way. If you have friends, you can ask them to be critique partners, but like, and a lot of the times, people like me really like it when we can teach people about our culture. Some people don't. So you just need to find the people who do, So let's see. Okay, so this question actually comes from Liam. How do I correctly write a white character who was raised by Chinese parents? So he has a character named Dr. Dexter Day, who is a white doctor who was raised by Chinese parents, completely raised in Chinese culture. And so in that instance, you're going to need to look at you're going to need to ask a Chinese person, first of all. But in his case, I mean, I've read the book that he's in, so I kind of know his situation. And basically he was raised by Chinese parents. He was raised by basically a Chinese sense of moral code. And he has in certain revisions criticized people for not following those ideals. And one of the comments actually that I gave was like, well, as a white person, that's kind of a gray area on whether or not he can give that feedback, misrepresenting his parents' culture. And the follow-up question to that was would it be easier just to make him Chinese? The short answer is yeah. I mean, I would if I were in your position, because he already has that experience, that lived experience of being raised by Chinese parents and in that culture. So if he's culturally Chinese, then it would just make sense to make him racially Chinese as well. I mean, because even though I was raised in Jewish culture, for instance, I was not raised in the religion, so like there is kind of a disconnect there. But like with a white character who was raised in Chinese culture, he's basically Chinese already the way he's written. So like I would make him Chinese if I were you. So, but yeah. So the last pre made question I have here is from Derek again. He writes, I understand that a lot of times there are places in a writing piece that are clear cut insensitive. Not to say it's intentional. However, I'm wondering how to approach the situation when a group is being referenced has mixed feelings about the reference material. For instance, people versus identity, people first language versus identity first language. And this is like a more autism specific question. So people first language, as in like person with autism versus identity first language, autistic person, it's going to depend on the individual, whichever one they prefer. So it's going to depend on your audience. If you're predominantly writing for a more I guess so an audience socialized from so typically people who were diagnosed early in their life will prefer a person first language, like person with autism, because that's how they were raised. That's how teachers, the kind of language that they use. So oftentimes that is the language that they prefer. People who were diagnosed late in life, like me, we have had the experience of being told all our life that we don't have these problems, and that our problems are insignificant in comparison to people who were diagnosed earlier. So our experience is invalidated in that way. So we typically prefer identity first language, autistic person, because it shows people, hey, I think in this way, I have this identity, and it's not right to remove that from my experience and to expect me to change for you. So so it's gonna depend on who your audience is. If you're writing predominantly for people who prefer person first language, you're going to know who's going to be gravitating towards that based on what happens to the character and how they grow. So I actually got into kind of a debate with an author online. It was a writing forum, and this guy was an own voices autistic author, and he wrote a curing plot because he personally didn't like having autism. And so he wrote a character where that character gets cured of their autism by like some divine staff or something. I can't remember, but I kind of told him that that's harmful to the community as a whole, even though that is your desire personally. That's going to be harmful to the people as a whole, because it's reinforcing the idea that we need to be changed societally, that autistic people need to assimilate in order to get ahead in life, and that's just not true. So those were all of the pre-made questions. Does anyone else have any questions after that? Anything about what we talked about? What did you say? Oh, sorry. Susan, how are we on time, by the way?
It is 4 minutes till the hour.
Oh, so perfect timing, actually. So anybody who has any follow-up questions, I mean, post them in the chat. I mean, you've got a few minutes. Oh, okay. So Sarah says, you've given me so much to think about. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, of course. That's I really wanted to kind of demystify what sensitivity reading is, so that because I haven't really seen a huge turnout lately in Muse classes for sensitivity reading. And I think a lot of that is just because people are afraid of it. People don't want to be faced with the reality that they can misrepresent a character in their story, and they don't want to be told, oh, your book is whatever ist because of this character. Like, that's very scary to people. But the key is that this book extends beyond you. This is more like representing a whole group of people is a lot more important than your feelings. I'm sorry. Let's the whole thing of like facts don't care about your feelings. Like that is true in this instance. It's more about the living people who you're talking about. It's it's a very large step for people a lot of the time, but it's necessary in order to be ethical with your writing. So um but yeah, I mean, in closing, I just really wanted to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you for allowing me to answer these questions and to be there for you. As a small plug, I do teach at the Muse regularly. I also you can find me also at Helm and your editing. That's in the chat. I'm always Liam and I are always open for submissions. I'm also available on Writing Diversely. You can request me there too. So it's a little bit cheaper to do it through Helm and Anchor, just just saying. But yeah, so really thank you guys for coming out. I really do appreciate you having me here, and thank you, Susan, for hosting this, and thank you to the Muse for allowing me to speak about this. And it's important work, and it's increasingly getting more important as people are getting more aware of these groups, and how real life consequences can play out for these living groups of people. So, especially with indigenous cultures, it's like people have this idea that like indigenous people, it's like in history, it's like ancient history, is like these people were fiction. It's like, no, these are real living people who have an oral history that is still continuing today, that exists. So, it's not right to make up something about a living group of people.
Right. Or to generalize about what is a very diverse group of different cultures.
Yes, exactly.
It's a broad umbrella. Well, thank you so much, Nate. I've really taken away a lot from this, and I really like what you said about a book being not about you. Once it's out of your hands, it's in the world. And I think that for a lot of people, like that's why we tell stories, is to connect with other people, and we do have an ethical responsibility to do that in a way that's as the least harmful way possible. So
Exactly.
yeah. So thank you for coming on. Thanks for talking with us. Thanks for teaching at the Muse, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you so much. Wow, this was great. Thank you. I'd love to do this again if I can.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you're watching live on Zoom or on Facebook, or
Hi,
if you're
Mom. Hi, Uncle
watching this
David.
recording after. Yeah, and check out the-muse.org. That's the Muse's website if you want to look at our classes and events. The 2023 winter spring schedule should be coming out soon. Keep an eye out for Nate's classes as well.
Thank you.
Again, thank you all so much. Have a lovely evening, lovely time zone wherever you are.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.